Man, I've been wanting to do this boys' show review for so long, but now that I'm actually ready, there's already so many. How am I supposed to stand out? I mean, I guess I could mention the comics here and there with all I know about them, but that doesn't feel like enough to really... Wait, could I? Oh, that was an evil thought. Sorry. It happens whenever I have my most clickable ideas. Hi, gamers. Braxton here. I'm the person you probably want to kill right now for my obvious clickbait. Or, well, you probably thought it was clickbait, seeing as from your perspective, no one could ever be so stupid they actually thought that. Like, sure, The Boys isn't always the best, and sometimes it can have a badly done scene, or subplot, or episode, or season, but to say it's a bad adaptation, or that because of it, the comics it's based on are potentially better, that's blasphemy, that's contrarianism. There's no way someone could think that dumb, edgy, edgelord, edge-filled garbage could ever even come close to the quality of the show, which is not dumb or edgy, it is very tasteful. But I do. And from here, I'm not gonna keep hammering in how crazy and different my opinion is, just because I find that sort of posturing kinda cringe and self-congratulatory, but I wanted to get it out of the way at the start of this just so you know that I'm not messing around here. I seriously think The Boys is a bad adaptation. I even think that a lot of what caused it to sag as it went was how much it tried to deviate from the comic without a plan. And if you'd give me a chance to try explaining myself, maybe you'll understand where I'm coming from. So please, hold off on the comments with my IP address and shit, wow, they're already there. I think that's a record. So what is The Boys? Yeah, I know I'm doing the softball introduction thing and you probably don't need me to tell you, but some people have lives, so in case you don't already know, it's a comic about this group of guys who keep tabs on superheroes since, in their more realistic world, they're more like celebrities or mascots than what you see in movies. They represent brands, belong to a company, handle endorsements, and well, seeing as they have godlike abilities that let them do basically anything depending on how powerful, the shit they get up to can range from kinda concerning to Lee Harvey Oswald except he's Superman. So whenever they're getting a bit too comfortable with said bullshit, the boys are there to investigate, blackmail, or straight up just smash some heads in to put them back in line, which I initially wrote as a synonym for fighting, but sometimes that's pretty literal, since yeah, as part of the realism, they aren't afraid to get sorta messy. Very messy. Inhumanly. And if you've heard of the author Garfinis before, that's probably not too surprising, since the guy really likes his gory details, but he also likes wrapping those details in fun characters and commentary, so it didn't stop The Boys from being a success. Like, it was extremely popular at the time it was out, especially for something with such a small label attached to distribute it, and so naturally, after long enough, once it was really making waves as a critique of the industry naturally came knocking and inevitably led to some vague adaptation news that never seemed to go anywhere, probably because they were trying for a movie, which just doesn't feel right for a run like The Boys. I mean, you might not assume it just from my brief summary description, but this is a series with deep lore and history that's essential knowledge to get the themes of the story. It's not the type of thing you can just cram into 90 minutes, even if they apparently had the visionary team behind the live-action Aeon Flux movie, which is something I probably just reminded you of for the first time in decades. Sorry about that. What it really needed was a show, and although it took a while to get there with all the years it spent fumbling around with the director of Anchorman, seriously, who picked out the fucking staff for this? In 2019, it finally happened, and it was kind of perfect timing, since superheroes were about as big in pop culture as they could get for completely different reasons than when the comic was running. Like, it was a whole new world out there for the boys to beat up and laugh at all over again. Sure, there'd have to be some changes, it being so heavy on Bush-era politics and all, but the main themes of the story are so universal, it could work at basically any time, and for the first season, prospects seemed fairly good. It was a bit more different than expected, taking some pretty big liberties to not be predictable, but the root of it all still seemed to be there, and as long as it stayed true to the oh hey season 2. Any reason you're holding that? Well, I don't know what I expected to happen. Signs were kinda there, even if it wasn't personified in a ticking cartoon time bomb. Wait, what? You see, the first season was promising as a start to the show, and on its own it works really well as this self-contained little thing, but when you put its choices in perspective with the arcs they're supposed to follow in the comics and how that affected their development later on, it's kinda obvious there wasn't much thought put into how those changes would end up working out long-term, leading to it getting worse not just in general, but also as an adaptation the more they tried to figure it out while making even more changes that equally didn't help. Now, like I said at the start, I know the comic has a bad reputation, so hearing me say the show gets worse at adapting it, you might want to say, oh, so does that mean it was good? Which if you already wrote that, I'm taking the shot, but I don't think it's just chance the series got worse and worse the more it strayed to do its own dumb or even contradicting ideas to what the original story was going for. You never know it since most people haven't read the comic or even actively refuse to because they're But there's more there to analyze than most give it credit for, and there's honestly a lot to like with the comic, especially when you know how much the show didn't do parts of it justice, even down to the main character. But wait, actually, do you even know who the main character is? Like, that's not a rhetorical question. I'm legitimately asking fans of the show who the main character is, because that should be an easy thing to answer, right? It's Hughie. You know, the first guy we follow, newest member of the boys, girlfriend killed by a soup in the opening minutes, recruited by Butcher before he brings the gang back together. That guy? I'm just making sure you remember right now, since if you keep up with the show, you might have forgotten he was initially the main focus, and it was for obvious reasons too. Hughie's the POV character, the one that's experiencing this world for the first time compared to the rest of the boys who've been doing this shit for years, and his perspective is kind of integral to have since he's the only one still sensitive enough to point out how fucked everything is. When they rip a dude's face off, he's there to be horrified. When they want to kill teen soups in training, he's there to try saving them. When one tries killing millions of people who've been exposed to the super chemical compound V to stop them from ever even potentially existing again, he's there to stop them. Since everything Hughie is as a character comes from how he just can't sink to the other boys' level, no matter how much they push him. In the words of Butcher, he's the only one of them that's decent. The only one who actually thinks of all the carnage around him and can't be happy inflicting it, even when it's on the guy that killed his girlfriend. Since in the end, he's a decent person and not a vengeance-obsessed sociopath like the rest of the boys. Not that they aren't likable or tragic or understandable in their own ways, because they are, but at the end of the day, they're not decent people. And that's exemplified in how they can kill without feeling shit about it. Okay, let's talk about this. So, Hughie's arc in Season 1 of the show is about going from a brave but wimpy dork who can't get anything done to a capable wimpy dork who's got the skill to look out for himself. And for an arc on its own, like I was saying, it works pretty well. But in the grand scheme of his character, making him an intentional killer episode 2 and showing him gradually get better at manipulation and blackmail in such a short time, like he's becoming one of them more and more, that just chucks a wrench into everything his character's supposed to be. I mean, it's one of the main themes of the story, that Butcher tries toughening Hughie up for when he thinks he'll need to be, only to fail, since Hughie doesn't have it in him to be a bad person. He can have lapses in judgment when Butcher hits the right nerves, but it never takes long before he recognizes and regrets that decision. So while giving him this arc in Season 1 might have seemed like a good idea at the time to, I don't know, make him more proactive or something, it kind of strips the main lead of his main defining trait before the season's even out. And that's really bad, since several arcs in the comic they're gonna be inspired from are directly about that, which I think is why they took the direction they did with him going forward. Like, fans of the show always ask, why does Hughie regress so much in Season 2? Why does he go back to being this incapable nerd that nobody trusts, who's basically there to be moral support or even an obstacle? And from what I can tell, the answer is because the writers saw he was becoming an almost new character and decided to backtrack out of fear. You know, the thing about changing him up is that it would have worked fine if they just stayed the course with this new direction, but I guess they remembered what his role in the group's meant to be and didn't want to lose that, so they tried to bring him back to the way he was before, only to realize they'd already taken him way beyond where he was ever supposed to go. I mean, in terms of his arc in the comic, Season 1 is like if Luffy found the One Piece before he even entered the Grand Line, and he sacrificed his crew to do it. They didn't just kill the heart of the series it's supposed to be centered around, they also destroyed any way to move forward based on the original plan. And again, that would have been fine if they had their own plan in mind to avoid the comparison, but it seems they apparently didn't, so what's left for them to do? They go back. So in Season 2, Hughie's not a capable, accepted member of the team anymore. He's, well, a weaselly little outsider, a kid. That moment when the boys thanked him for risking his life on his own to save them after Butcher abandoned them didn't happen. Mandela effect. Team Butcher for life, guys.
Oh mon dieu, désolé petit Hughie, it's just you know, you finished your arc too fast in the wrong way, so we must return to the status quo.
But they can't even do that much, since disregarding the fact it makes Season 1 pointless by throwing out his progression, Hughie's whole thing in the comics is that he's supposed to be uncorruptible, which, Season 1 kind of proved he absolutely can be, so realistically the best option here should be to just go ahead with this new character now that they've proven he's not Hughie from the comics, but no, you son of a bitch, the status quo. We must return to the status quo, even if we can't actually do that. And so for Season 2 onward, I guess to give the impression he's still that decent, innocent guy he was in the comics, they make it so that 1, everyone shits on him constantly to his face for just existing, since that makes him look good and not fucking pathetic.
You're just a kid that sells stereo equipment.
No, I don't.
Kids fall apart.
Well, what'd you expect? He's a fucking civilian.
You're not the cuck. I'm the cuck. Actually, you're worse.
This is the guy?
He's even more of a twink than in the photo. I could split that shit like dry firewood.
Big fan.
2, he now whines all the time that they're not doing things the right way despite participating before, since that'll make him look moral and not like a smug, hypocritical cunt. 3, the rest of the boys talk about him like a cheering cancer kid in a sports movie who's just so adorably incapable, but hey, you gotta love him for trying.
We can't leave the kid, man. Huey's not gonna make it, and you need that kid.
You're so scared of being alone, Hughie.
You were always like my canary, I suppose. What?
It's the kid shampoo he uses and his Axe body spray. Oh, but he really just never gives up on you.
4, he briefly gets really insecure about his newfound utter uselessness before remembering how great it is to be on the sideline. And 5, he never progresses at all as a character, since that's the same as him keeping his morals, even though Comic Huey did go through serious arcs. They just weren't related to him trying to stay good. But yeah, the staff obviously didn't know what to do with him, so it's kinda no wonder the series got less and less about him each season as they kept failing harder and harder at rewinding him to his old self. For season 2, he doesn't do anything but get told how much he sucks, but like, in an endearing way. For season 3, he actually tries to be relevant again, which gets him a loving slap in the face until he squirms to the background where he belongs. There's just nothing there for him after season 1 except a mildly interesting subplot in season 4, and the coveted status of being Annie's twink bitch boy. The show's words, not mine.
Take your fucking twink and get the fuck out of here!
Man, just imagine treating your used-to-be main character like this. It's kind of sad. And that's not even mentioning how it also sort of shows how another big part of the show, that being his relationship with Annie, was given the exact same treatment, which is arguably even worse seeing as that's supposed to be the through line of the story. Like, when you're watching the show, it kind of gets messy what the main thing you're supposed to be invested in is above everything else. Season 1, it's clearly about Huey's growth, which
You always have to be so much stronger than me.
obviously doesn't last. Then it shifts in and out of being about Butcher's relationship with Ryan, or dealing with the villain of the season, and maybe getting Homelander? It's never that precise about the one arc that sums up everything it's trying to say, and that's part of why it feels like it drags so much after a certain point. It's looking for a narrative thread you can latch onto, which leads to just dozens and dozens of pointless fucking subplots, but it never has that one big thing you know matters most of all and ties the shit together. That's what Huey and Annie's relationship was. Like, the one main recurring theme of the comic is wondering how their romance could be affected by what's currently happening, since, and it might shock you to hear this if as you are reading you weren't paying attention or thought the non-soup stuff was boring and skipped it, but The Boys is, at its core, a love story. Unironically, it's a narrative about these two kind, genuine people brought into cruel, unforgiving spaces that tell them they need to act some way and give up a piece of who they are, only to find each other and realize there's still good left in the world. It's a small pocket of the world, one they never show to anyone else out of fear they'll lose it, but whenever they're struggling or thinking to themselves, how am I ever gonna keep living like this, they think of each other, and that's enough to keep them going. It's not a perfect relationship, they have bumps and holes that get in the way, and one of the most heartbreaking moments is when those horrible worlds they live in find a way to tear them apart, but no matter how much they go through, they still stick it out together since they found each other. A whole world of bullshit and horror and madness and more than anything fucking darkness, and with a little light to guide them, they found each other. It's why the last page of the comic is them kissing on a bright new day ready to face the world together. Because in the end, they make it out, and there's no better way the story could end for them. But the show doesn't really get this at all, and honestly, I don't think it ever did if their first interaction is anything to go by. Cause that's supposed to be this really important moment. You know, it happens in issue 5, we've gotten to see how Huey's sort of been forced to join the boys, while Annie's been forced to do things to stay in the 7. Both are at their lowest, about to reach their breaking point, and then them finding each other saves them from giving into the darkness. But the show doesn't have that build up at all, and I'm pretty sure that's because they didn't even notice their stories are supposed to be parallel, since it happens in episode 1, first of all, way before the setup is finished, and secondly, Huey isn't even close to his lowest here. He's not contemplating the job now that he's been manhandled into being a part of it. He hasn't even joined the boys yet officially. Annie's had her experience, but he's still got some horrors to go through for this scene to have real meaning. So the interaction isn't really about them lifting each other up out of of despair, it's just Hughie giving her a pep talk that unintentionally convinces him to join the boys. It completely misses the goal of the scene, and it gets even more ruined by episode 3 when Hughie finds out that Annie's a soup, since the whole idea is supposed to be that their relationship escapes the bounds of the horrible worlds they both live in, and the moment it catches up to them, it almost breaks them apart. I mean, I've heard some people say the comic takes too long before Annie and Hughie figure out who they are given their positions, but that's literally the point. That they're so caught up in the love they feel for each other, they don't even notice something that should be obvious. Again though, the show doesn't get that, so by the end of season 1, their romance just sorta exists in the shitty world they both inhabit, and as a result, it feels just as shitty. There's nothing wholesome about their relationship or what it provides for them now, it's just slightly better than what they have with everyone else. The magic just isn't there. The most important part of the original story, the thing that should drive everything they do, isn't there anymore. And fucking god, it feels like it, since yeah, the comic was also dark, but that was explicitly for the contrast whenever Annie and Hughie met up, like cigarette smoke clearing when they leave the office. But in the show, it's more like they're just sharing cigarettes while the smoke keeps building. It's fucking depressing. No more scenes of them giving the other advice. Now there's a subplot where Hughie gets jealous about her hanging with an ex. No more comforting about their worries. Now there's a season where he just always feels inferior. No more feelings of openness. Now Annie finds a way to frame him getting assaulted like he was cheating on her. You see why this doesn't work when you let the world have its way with them? Though a lot of this goes back to how they handled Annie in general, which is kind of on the same level as Hughie in how badly they fuck it up. Actually, no, it's definitely worse, since Annie's arc in the comic is one of the best grappling with assault stories I've ever read. See, initially the way we're introduced to Annie is through her being sexually coerced. Like, she's just been led into the Seven, it's like a dream come true for her since it's what every superhero wants, and then after a tour from Homelander, he asks her to suck him off. And right after that, when 2 other members see this happening, A-Train and Black Noir, they ask her for the same. Now, they're not gonna quote-unquote force her to do it, but if she won't, then they can just send her back to her old country town with her old Christian-based C-tier team. And this is an amazingly well thought out scenario, since it has just enough stakes to where they know she'll do it, but also just enough not at stake for her to think it's a choice. Since obviously this is coercive assault, but it's framed in just the right way so they have plausible deniability. And that's how it works in Annie's mind for a lot of the comic afterwards. She always thinks of it as what she did, the choice she made. She never even considers that it wasn't her fault until after it breaks up her and Hughie, when she gets the time to think it over for once and realize she's a victim. It wasn't her fault for being put in that position, willing to do anything to keep what she's been told for years is her entire purpose. It's the fault of the men that assaulted her and the system that allowed it. And there's even a moment where it goes out of its way to have Hughie apologize for making the same mistake of blaming her, since he knows she didn't do it because she wanted to. That's some extremely powerful stuff for a piece of 2000s media, let alone a satire comic about beating up Nazi superheroes alongside an ex-Soviet one with a huge cock. Really, it's the type of trauma that's not discussed much in anything, frankly, and the way her overcoming it helps Annie find the confidence to be more open, questioning the strict way she was raised and the fear she had at being herself. It's great. But it's also not in the show, since they completely changed the assault to mean something else. Like, it's one of the first things they changed to be more modern about in the wake of Me Too, and on its own that's fine, but the problem comes with how they frame it, since in the comic it's clearly a sad reality of the industry that everyone knows but doesn't care about, and there's clearly gonna be no repercussions for it. Whereas in the show, it's just one guy, the Deep, being an asshole. And he doesn't just give her the option of doing it or going back home, he also tells her if she doesn't do it, he'll get her fired and say she attacked him. So there's not that same intentional ambiguity to make her feel like maybe she chose it. It's clear now that from every angle she's being forced, and that's how she feels about it from the moment she does it to the moment she tells people. There's not that same arc of being forced to question herself. It's just a very cut and dry scenario, which doesn't work in the long run for Annie's story, since her struggles are supposed to be themed after the industry forcing her to change the same way it forced her to do what they asked until she finds the strength to finally say no. It's supposed to be a gradual transformation, but through them never making her doubt herself and letting her overcome the main symbol of what's keeping her down by episode 5, at least emotionally, they're just pulling another Hughie and giving her a series worth of developments before the season's even out. So what else could happen but them not knowing where to take her either? It's like they're trying to make this as hard as possible. And alright, personality. Annie's personality was directly affected by the openness she had in overcoming her trauma. So since she doesn't have any trauma to overcome now, at least in the blaming herself type of way, they just give her some more trauma. Now she's got a controlling show mom cliche who's so transparent about it, she basically says,
Annie, don't you get it? I've been living through you your entire life. Now you get out there and do as I say. And don't you even think about triumphantly standing up to my authority in front of a crowd, young lady.
Like, for something that's supposed to be riffing on Marvel, this sure feels pretty fucking Disney Channel. And even then, that's also done by episode 5, though they try to bring it back like once a season. So after that, the only way she grows is by becoming really cynical, despite at the end of season 1 saying she wouldn't become cynical, and also by becoming really atheist?
There is nothing up there. It's all just lies.
Since in the comic, part of her opening up is confronting all the ways religion was used to make her self-conscious and hate herself, which is a very real experience, but in the show, they're constantly revealing Annie wasn't afraid to party or drink or have sex, so I guess she just stopped believing cause religion bad? Like, this is coming from an atheist who grew up Catholic, so it's not like I disagree exactly, but in the comic, it felt like a very character-motivated decision, whereas here, it feels more like preaching? I mean, in that big speech she makes episode 5, one of her lines is unironically, "This book was written over 2,000 years ago. It says you shouldn't be allowed to eat fish. I don't think you're supposed to take it too literally." And I was fucking bawling at this since that's so unmistakably an r/atheism talking point. What are we doing here? Was there no better way to show her growth, or did they just misread the comic that badly? At this point, I feel like you should know the answer to that. But her and Hughie don't even compare to how much they fuck up the main villains, Homelander and Butcher. And there's a reason I'm bringing them up now instead of later, since almost no one seems to pick up on this even though it's extremely blatant, but them being the villains has a very intentional purpose. They're reflections of who Hughie and Annie would be if they didn't have each other. Butcher is Hughie if Annie didn't keep him from giving into his hate after losing Robin, and Homelander is Annie if Hughie didn't stop her from giving into the system and changing who she is. They're another set of parallels, and it's actually a really clever idea since that's a classic way of writing villains in superhero stories. Lex Luthor is Superman if he used his gifts selfishly, Venom is Spider-Man with no responsibility, Mr. Freeze is Batman if he couldn't let go. It's the type of homaging to tropes you could only get from someone who really knows comics, and so of course they're missing from their show versions. Not that if they were there you'd make the connection, seeing as Hughie's never on the verge of giving into his hate, and Annie's never on the verge of giving into the system, but still, that doesn't mean they should replace him with something worse. Homelander's obviously the lesser of the two since he's still an interesting character with a great performer, even if they make him less intimidating and smart the more he just becomes Trump as the commentary gets lazier, but just the idea that he's a sociopathic monster who's constantly on a razor's edge of going insane is such a shitty interpretation it's almost impossible. Since Homelander at his core isn't that hard to understand. I know there are some people who get mad at the fact he's not as much of a, well, comic book villain at the start, he's just sort of some asshole, but to repeat myself a bit for emphasis here, that's the point. Since Homelander and really superheroes in general in The Boys, but most specifically him, is a play on the idea that heroes aren't amazing because of their powers, but how they choose to use them. Like the one scene people almost universally praise the comic for is when Homelander's getting told off for being unoriginal, and that's basically all about explaining what he is. He's Superman if he were just a regular guy, since a regular guy wouldn't think about using his powers to help people, he'd use them selfishly, and that's what Homelander does. He's not naturally cartoonishly evil or anything, he's just a dick with a lot of power who uses that power the way any unremarkable person would. His arc in the comic is about trying to convince himself he's special since he sees the dirt the boys have on supposedly him doing horrific things and figures it must be proof he's beyond humanity, pretty much gaslighting himself into thinking he's a god. But in the end, when he tries to go evil, what does he do? He preys on the weak. And that's about the most unoriginal thing someone with power could do. He wants to think he's proving his superiority by going off on a tantrum and killing people, but it's how limited his ideas are that just proves more than anything he's a human. And Stillwell might not say it in that scene, but when he asks Homelander if he's ever done anything even slightly original, he's talking about what a superhero would do. Help people, save them, put his life on the line for the sake of others, stuff that doesn't come normally to people in power. It's a statement about both the nature of humanity and what makes superheroes so extraordinary in fiction. There's no better way to sum up what The Boys is saying about Supes than with Homelander. And the show just turned him into a crazy guy who goes, "Bleh!" Okay, it's not that bad. The show's version of Homelander still has some merit as a character, but he can't represent what The Boys is about anymore since he's not normal. He wears a mask with a smile for hours at a time. No, but seriously, in turning Homelander into this love-deprived maniac who's been psychologically forced to rely on people's approval for comfort, they're fundamentally undermining everything he's supposed to be. I've heard people wondering like, whoa, are they gonna do the talk-down scene in season 5? But they quite literally can't do that since what Stillwell says is only applicable to an average guy who got superpowers and chose to use them selfishly. And the one thing the show's drilled into you about Homelander from episode 1 is that he's anything but average. Hope all the breast milk scenes are fucking worth it. And I just know this wasn't intentional, since there's no way they had a conversation like, we could have a character that represents all the themes of the story and his arc over the show, or we could have a scene where he milks a cow and drinks straight from the bucket. Gentlemen, I believe we all know what to do here. And you can even tell how badly they're misinterpreting things through some of the scenes they try to copy, like the mirror scene. See, in the comic, this is right around when Homelander's trying to convince himself he's special, so what better way to prove as much than have a supervillain monologue in the mirror like he's talking to an evil alter ego in his head. And they adapt this pretty faithfully in the show, except for, the part where he admits he's forcing it and says, and I quote, "This is stupid, I'm not mad. What am I gonna do next? Invent a special evil voice for the parts I don't like hearing?" Hey, run me back the scene in the show real quick.
For God's sakes, look at you. You still need love. You still crave it. That's not true.
Oh, okay, so they took the scene that was explicitly about making fun of the trope to show Homelander isn't crazy, and then they just played it straight. Great, fantastic. Excuse me for a moment. And yet somehow Butcher's drawing the short stick here, since while you could at least make the case that other soups fill the same story role as Homelander, so him being different doesn't destroy the theme, with Butcher there's no excuses. They completely drop the ball with him. And it hurts to say that, because unlike Homelander, he started out with some potential to live up to his comic counterparts. Like, I already mentioned he's an analog for Hughie if he didn't find love after losing his last girlfriend, but something that separates the two is that Butcher could never have found love again since there was only ever one girl for him. Becky. It wasn't just a matter of finding someone, she was his entire world. I actually find it kind of hard to sum up their relationship in a couple words since there's so much detail put into proving just how meant for each other they were, but the best way to put it is that Becky was the type of girl who made you want to change just to see her happy. Since on one hand she was bright and bubbly and always saw the best in Butcher even at his lowest, but on the other she was extremely blunt about what she thought and knew how to give him pause just with the sincerity of her words. Before her, Billy was just a drunken vet from a broken home who seemed to rile himself up intentionally so he could get into fights he knew he'd lose. But with Becky there to point out his patterns, he learned to improve from them and finally live his best life for the sake of her. But she wasn't some kind of manic pixie dream girl archetype either. She was a very real person who had a hard time with Butcher's idolization of her since she always felt like the ability to change was inside him from the start. All she ever did was help him realize he was capable, which sort of speaks to the best thing about Becky. She never saw Butcher as a monster that needed to be fixed. There wasn't any pity involved or condescension. To her, she was just helping him bring out the person he always was under all the pain. And that says pretty much all you'd ever need to know about him without saying anything. It's why he's the one who coins the phrase that people find each other. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that when she was taken, killed by a soup's assault pregnancy lasering out of her after she spent months hiding it from him, that became Butcher's world. It was like all that anger he'd thrown away for her came back worse than it ever had before, but since he'd held on to some of her words in the worst way possible, he was different. Less impulsive, more calculated, willing to wait as long as he needs to get the best shot at them possible. And he knows he's spitting on her memory in doing it, since he knows she'd never want him to be that way. In fact, after her death, he finds out a part of why she hid what happened was because she knew he'd devote his entire life to getting revenge and never be satisfied until it killed him. And Butcher knows it too. He recognizes how empty and selfish what he's doing is, and that his hatred will never, ever, ever have an end to it. He even sees it as cheating and knows he can only do it with her gone, since he couldn't live with himself knowing he made her feel anything other than happy. But he still does it regardless, since, in his own words, there's no one left to stop him. His brother, his mom, the love of his life, every person with the power to pull him back was gone. And in the epilogue story, Dear Becky, it goes into how he even had to kill her memory since her voice was getting him to have second thoughts about what he was doing, which is ultimately why at the start of the comic he hires Hughie. Since he knows he's a monster who needs to be stopped with where his hatred's heading, but he can't do it himself. So who better to do it than a version of him that's actually decent like his brother was? And it's explanations like that that prove Ennis had a plan from the beginning. He knew exactly what type of tragic, terrible, earnest, heartfelt, uplifting story of love and death he'd tell from the moment he started writing, and Butcher is the ultimate testament to that. So you'd think they'd be extra careful to make sure they got him right for the show. And like I said at the start, they really do. There's not a lot of characters they keep more or less the same from the comics starting out, and that mostly ends up being a bad thing, go figure, but Butcher's the one aspect that feels almost unchanged. He's just as much of a bastard, just as calculating, just as lawless, just as willing to throw everything away for even a shot at making Soups hurt in the same way he did. And there's even a couple original scenes in here that show me that during the first season, they understood his character. The therapy scene, where he goes off at victims of Soup relationships for wallowing in pity instead of getting angry and getting even. The scene where he abandons his team when he knows he might finally get the chance he's been waiting for. That bit in the finale where he's willing to blow up the one person Homelander cares about along with her baby and himself just to hurt him. Like, when I saw this, I was cheering out, "Woo! Baby murder, let's fucking go!" Which wasn't the best thing to shout in my suburban Texas neighborhood, but I do it again, since this is who Butcher's meant to be. Man, I'm still geeking out about it. And then he just had to go and ruin the ride. I mean, revealing that Becky's still alive and raising the super son that should have killed her, well, actually, I didn't know how to feel about it at first, since, hey, for both new and old fans alike, it's an unexpected twist that could have been used for some great new directions, presenting Butcher with essentially the worst scenario he could ever have thought of being true and making him grapple with that. There's loads of potential here, but it just doesn't really work out at all because Butcher and Becky's relationship here isn't it. And honestly, it never has been. I mean, granted, without the miniseries, you don't know as much about the complexities of their relationship in the comic either, but even going purely off the main run, one of the first things Butcher does is convey to Hughie how much she meant to him and why, whereas in season 1, there's just never that same kind of depth. We know Butcher loved his wife, and he's still holding out hope she's alive, which, you know, clashes heavily with who he's supposed to be, though that's besides the point, but it's only ever in that grieving husband lashing out over his dead wife sort of way. It doesn't tell us what makes him losing her feel like so much more than just the comic tropes it's supposed to be outdoing. So when we learn she's alive, there's nowhere near the shock or confusion it should be giving us, and even when it gets the chance to go deeper, it really doesn't. We never learn about their history, we don't know how much it meant to Butcher or how she changed him. She never gets a word in to mention how he's changed since the last time she saw him, if anything she says that he hasn't changed that much. There's just none of that detail and nuance that made their connection so special, and whenever we do get details, it's like the show's trying everything it can to destroy the image the comic created. Oh, why did Becca go to Vought instead of Butcher once she learned she was pregnant? Well, because she wasn't just worried he'd go on a revenge quest and it'd never end for him. No, she was scared of him doing that, since she also saw him as a violent maniac who was one bad day away from bashing someone to death in a parking lot, which, okay, I've explained their relationship at this point, so I hope you'll understand this when I say, fuck you for implying she'd ever be scared of Butcher, let alone see him like that, so much so that she'd be willing to abandon him even if it's for the greater good, quote unquote. That is not who Becky was, and 2 seasons later, after she's dead for sure, they somehow top this bastardization by saying Butcher cheated on her while drunk, and that was the night he gave up drinking, which deserves an even bigger fuck you, since Butcher would never cheat on Becky while she was alive. Hello, this is the guy who thinks he's cheating on her by going against what she would have wanted for him by being violent. That's how much he valued her, and you fucks have the indecency to imply he not only hadn't quit drinking because of her, something she originally convinced him to do to better himself and not be like his father, but that he only gave it up after cheating and never told her about it. Where do you get off? You got any other bright new insights you want to bring to the table? How about we make it so Aang killed a bunch of dudes in secret while mastering his bending steel technique? Or that Mr. Incredible actually did fuck that hot receptionist? How about we just ruin everything? And I don't think I even need to mention how finding her alive should have made Butcher question literally every choice he's ever made. Like, this should be a legit mental breakdown for him, given all he's supposed to have done to erase her memory and carry on with his master plan. But of course, it's not, since apparently their relationship wasn't even that deep. What's that you said about the point and motivation of his character thematically in the story? Sorry, I couldn't hear you over the sound of me ripping up these comic pages to put in the fire. Say again? Speaking of trash fires, that reminds me what they did to him after this reveal and Becca's subsequent death. Cause from that shit onward, they just clearly aren't sure where they want to take him, which is really funny to watch considering they're the ones who put themselves in this situation. See, they've already kind of destroyed the comic's narrative by making Hughie unimportant, his relationship with Annie a subplot at best, the parallels between him and Butcher weak, and Butcher's own motivation nigh unrecognizable, meaning he's pretty thoroughly been displaced from his role to the point it's hard to tell where he even fits in anymore. So the show just decides his new goals are 1, kill Homelander however he can, and 2, look after Ryan, which obviously leads to a conflict of interest since for goal number 1, he needs to act like comic Butcher, while for goal number 2, they just blatantly try to make Butcher something he's not, an anti-hero. Since let's get something dead fucking straight here, Butcher is a villain. He's a sympathetic villain, but that's the extent of it. So going for this whole kid representing what's left of his wife changes his perspective and makes him value different things cliche shouldn't even be a factor. You know why? Because one of the first things he does when he notices Becky's influence trying to stop him is figuratively kill it in his mind, since he knows any remnant of her will just distract from his goal. I mean, he literally describes it as forcing himself to dissociate so much he's pretty much not even there. So while it might sound fucked for me to say, if he ever knew about Ryan, he wouldn't try to raise him or keep him safe, he'd kill him, since he'd know it would just keep him from his goal. And what do you know, after he's introduced, Ryan's almost exclusively used in the show to keep him from killing Homelander. Butcher takes Temp V to get superpowers and finds someone who can one-shot Homelander? Ooh, but he hit Ryan and might get him in the blast. Better team up with Homelander to beat this guy instead. Butcher finds a drug that'll kill Homelander and every other soup in the process? Ooh, but Ryan's a soup, and he can't kill him. Like, he's nothing but a constant reminder for why Butcher purged any remnant of Becky from his soul. It just extends the conflict on in this endless loop. And look, maybe it could work, maybe, if Ryan were just that good a character, but he's the embodiment of a fuck you plot device. One episode, he's moral and acts like a normal kid, the next he's fine watching a guy get his head exploded. It's no wonder Butcher can't pick a side, he's tethered to a plotline with no fucking consistency. I swear, the only thing keeping people from noticing this is just how many subplots they give to every single character now, whether they need one or not. Since in the comic, it was simple. The main leads are Hughie and Annie, so almost every issue is from one of their perspectives. Sometimes it'll be Butcher or Homelander or maybe Stillwell. Occasionally we'll see from the other boys or members of the Seven, but it's got a clear focus. You're never gonna forget it's Hughie's story before anyone else's. But in the show after season 1, they just do whatever they want. Maeve, Deep, A-Train, Noir, Frenchie, Female, MM, Ashley, Stormfront, Soldier Boy, Firecracker, Sage, Ryan, Vic, Donkey. Every season they just keep layering the thing with new subplots to the point it almost makes you forget what the show's about. You know, with a name like The Boys, you'd think it'd be about mainly, the boys, but from season 2 on, I guess it's about everyone, even though for the most part, they shouldn't matter. Like, they find a decent loophole to give us some soup-focused subplots in season 1, since they're humanizing them while still showing their pieces of shit as they should be, but after that, they ruin it by either going full comedy routine where the character never changes like with Deep, or they genuinely try to make you care for them like with A-Train. And neither of these work since one feels like a waste of time and the other feels like it forgot who these characters were. Why the fuck should I care about A-Train trying to connect with his community and growing apart from his brother? The opening minutes of the show are him running through Hughie's girlfriend and turning her into paste, which he then spends the next 2 seasons acting like he's not even wrong for. I don't care if he somehow learned empathy after his brother got paralyzed. I don't want to follow him. And that's sort of the thing with soups in the comic. Most of them are empathetic, but almost none of them are sympathetic, which basically means you understand where they're coming from, you can see them as human, but you don't feel bad for them or like they deserve better. Not that there aren't soups who are like that, there are. Maeve and G-Wiz are just victims of the system, Voss and Annie were actually trying to help, Super Duper has good intentions, objectively there's a bunch who never do too much wrong like the Deep, Tech Knight, and Soldier Boy, but most of the time, soups are just kinda knowing assholes. Of course, you've got your extreme cases from time to time like Stormfront or the G-Men, which the boys specialize in, but a majority of them are just spoiled celebrities who will do anything they can to hold on to the good life, so that's how they're depicted. As understandable, but hard to root for. And to an extent, it's kinda the same with the other boys. I mean, obviously they're on a different level as victims lashing out at their abusers, so unlike with soups, they've all got sympathetic traits, but like I said before, the comic also acknowledges they're not decent people. It's sorta hard to be when they're
tearing off other people's faces every other issue. Now, a better phrase for them would be damaged maniacs, since they've been through a lot that warrants how they feel about soups, but the way they go about dealing with it isn't healthy. They're not treating the sickness, they're just wallowing in the pain together, and nothing shows that better than the female's arc with Frenchie, which only occasionally pops up and usually goes on in the background, but when it does get a focus, there's always some meaningful developments. You see, just like in the show, the female physically is the strongest of the boys, and that's from how ever since she swallowed a consumable form of Compound V as a baby accidentally, she's been used as a weapon. That's actually why she's called the female, aside from being the only girl on the team. It's a way of reminding people she's a person, not an it. But she still has trouble leaving that past behind from all the years she spent being conditioned, so a lot of the time, out of impulse, she ends up taking hits from the mob to sate her bloodlust, and that's what Frenchie's trying to help her with over the story, since while the others don't care as long as she's useful in missions, Frenchie knows there's something more, and that fundamentally she's not heartless, so he tries all he can to support her growth. Like, one of the main running gags of the comic is how often Frenchie and female are just up to some bullshit in the background of the office, and that's because it's him trying to get her mind off of killing, so it's mostly going on off screen, but over the series we can see in her gestures that she's becoming gentler and less reliant on violence in general. It's a super heartwarming arc, especially with the tragedy of them both dying right before they could leave it all behind. And you know what else it is? Way better than whatever they were doing with their subplots in the show, which are long, boring, and half the time have nothing to do with the story or themes. It's all just another layer to slap on the pile of useless shit. And oh, we couldn't go without a contrived will they won't they story, cause that's what Frenchie and female's relationship was missing, that unspoken but palpable type of platonic love they have in the comic. No, he must stick his dick in there. Je t'aime from the first, more like, I love you, bitch. I'm never gonna stop loving you, bitch. And forget all that contemplating what this does to them shit. There's nothing potentially psychologically scarring about this that we might want to change or even address. We're not Butcher. It's fine. Nothing to dig into here.
Unless it's Frenchie's backstory about being an abused little dog boy and, like, killing his gay lover's family or something. Then we take it very seriously. Then that's when we talk about mental health.
But seriously, I do feel like one of the main problems with the show's boys is how they never seem to question the morality of what they're doing or how it's affecting them, at least in a deeper way. Because obviously you've got stuff like Hughie leaving to do things by the book for an episode and so on, but in cases like that, they're always discussing it from like a legal angle. Are they breaking the law with this? Do they have government backing? That sort of thing. But it never really questions how bad it is for the soul or their mental health, which is weird since the boys is supposed to be a destructive club for people who don't know how to sort their issues. That's the point of them as a group. They're supposed to show what can happen when, instead of dealing with trauma, you just take it out on others with the excuse that it's fine, since the ones you're doing it to deserve it. In fact, that's probably why the comic starts by explaining their CIA connection, so they don't have to worry about all the trivial shit like legal coverage, so they can focus on the characters. I mean, even them being backed in the first place is sort of a dig at governments exploiting the mentally ill by having them join the force so they can let out their impulses for a better cause. The moral grayness and mental abuse are supposed to be the core themes they're built on, and I can only assume the reason it's not there is because 1, they made it so minus female they aren't V'd up themselves, meaning they leave most of the fighting to soup characters as they just sit in the corner. 2, they made it so the CIA aren't willing to get involved in their underhanded shit without legal standards, which... And 3, the show just has a way more black and white mentality on what they're doing, since it seems to view the boys less like a collection of broken people being destructive and more like a group of outcast vigilantes standing up to the big bad corporation. You know, it's going for a Guardians of the Galaxy type of vibe, where they've all got their own quirks and issues that tend to affect them, and they aren't quite professional when getting the job done, but most of the time, unless Butcher's involved, they're morally in the right, so why even think about the mental toll? What mental toll? There's nothing concerning about female casually ripping a dude's arms off or impaling them on a dildo. We know she's morally in the right, so it's all good. It's not like just the act of repeated mutilating and killing itself can be bad for you or something. God, I miss the days when Hughie's PTSD from the job was highlighted with how it tore him away from Annie when he learned the truth. Oh, comic Hughie, save me, please! For real though, it's such an overly simplistic view of the boys, and it leads to Vought, the soup company, getting the same sort of broad brush that takes them from a stand-in for basically any generic business that values profit over safety into like this evil mustache-twirling corporation founded by actual Nazis. And don't get me wrong, that's not to say Vought doesn't do some seriously evil things in the comic. They literally get their start selling cheap defective goods to the military that get hundreds killed since it was easier to profit from, but that's also an example of what separates it from the show. They're not evil, they're just apathetic, like any big corporation. They don't do anything evil for the love of the game, it's just the easiest way to profit. So when an African tribe doesn't want to give up their land, Vought sends Stormfront to make it look like a natural disaster just took him out. When a hero dies for whatever stupid reason, they reanimate the corpse for a couple press tours to keep the margins good. And when the president's affiliated with the competition, they try to assassinate him to get their guy, the VP, in charge, who will let them get away with more. See, they might be doing ungodly evil things, but it's all optimized for the sake of money. They're like the definition of it's nothing personal, just business. And hey, for season 1, the show got this. But it all goes to shit in season 2, which is a really funny coincidence given that's when they pass off the duty of Soup Wrangler to the guy who should be a representation of everything business stands for, James Stillwell. Or in this case, Stan Edgar. Now, I'm not going to talk about Madeline Stillwell, seeing as she was an obvious red herring invented for the show, who worked pretty well as a satire on your average two-faced Disney executive, but Stan Edgar? So in case you're unaware, Stillwell's the guy who was telling off Homelander for being basic, and that scene alone should give you a good idea of what he's like. A total soulless machine. The guy has no fear, takes zero shit, carries out everything he does with stupid efficiency, and only ever thinks in terms of what's best for the brand. He's the living embodiment of a company, which means he never does anything without a good, logical reason that has the highest possible chance to turn out well for them. And one of the first things Stan Edgar does is put a literal fucking Nazi on his #1 team. What? Okay, so the explanation he gives near the end of the season is that Stormfront makes people angry and scared so they'll want to buy V, but Stanny boy, that doesn't account for the fact you put a literal Nazi on your #1 very public superhero team and let her go off on rants about immigration with the Vought logo right in the background. Aren't Vought supposed to be a progressive brand? Isn't that something they reinforce as a joke almost every episode? So why is she going on the Vought equivalent to Fox News to talk with Vought Tucker Carlson and spread propaganda about super terrorists? Like, there's a reason that in real life Disney intentionally didn't take the news arm when they bought 20th Century Fox. It clashed with their brand. Vought shouldn't want anything to do with fear-mongering or extremist political stances, no matter how good she is at making people angry. Did you not have anyone with a better way of incentivizing people to buy from you than, let's just do what the Nazis did because we're evil like that? It doesn't make any logical sense. And that's not even mentioning how, you know, she's so cartoonishly racist the mere sight of a black man was enough to make her kill an entire apartment's worth of people in broad daylight. You don't see a potential problem with that? Really? Oh, but of course you don't. I mean, it's not like you did your one fucking job of reining in Homelander when he started going schizo mode and appointed himself boss of the Seven. Sure, he might be the face of your brand that all your stock is riding on, but he can just crash a political opponent's rally and change the company slogan to be more nationalistic and agree with whatever the Nazis saying while making his own political speeches. That's fine, cause we're evil too, right? You see, what you don't understand, Homelander, is that we are an evil company. We make evil choices and do evil things that clash with our profit model. Since we aren't grounded in reality, we're grounded in being the big bad corpo causing all the world's problems because fuck you. Like, I think it's fair to say it's not as deep or realistic as commentary when its closest thematic equivalent is the Illumination Lorax movie. Remember that? When they took the intangible concept of apathy in business and made it a short evil guy who bottles the air people breathe? That's what this does to Vought. It takes a strong symbol for the horrors of greedy, indifferent capitalism and makes them about as deep as a Captain Planet villain. So now they don't act on logic, nothing they do makes any sense from a business perspective, they just slowly shift into being the evil Homelander company, serving all his evil schizo Homelander needs. Think I'm exaggerating? By the end of season 4, they are a Christian nationalist, conspiracy theory spreading, totalitarian government psyop who enact martial law to round up every single liberal in America and put them in concentration camps using superheroes. I didn't make that up, that's actually what happens. I wonder who the bad guys are supposed to be. It's all just so painfully simplified to make them this legion of doom the boys can fight against, even though Vought itself was never meant to be the enemy but the ideas they represented. That's why James Stillwell isn't treated like a person by basically anyone. You know, we never learn about his backstory or personal motivations or family members, and that's because ultimately none of it matters. A company doesn't have those things, so why should he? He's unironically very close to Patrick Bateman. There's an idea of James Stillwell, some kind of abstraction, but there's no real real him, only the amalgamation of a company's ruthless professional standards. And the same goes for Vought itself. There's nothing special about it, it's just the natural consequence of a culture where doing the minimum effort gets the most profit. So the boys can try to fight it, and they do, but just like the end of the comic shows, they're never gonna beat it, since Vought isn't a company. It's the concept of exploiting the system, which means the only thing that can stop it is, well, its own inherent flaws. I mean, when you look at the downfall of Vought in the comics, it's not from anything the boys themselves actually do. No, what sinks Vought is their own faulty product, Soups. Because if they weren't a faulty product, Vought wouldn't have felt the need to do a failsafe in the form of Black Noir, a clone of Homelander made with the sole intention of killing him if he ever went off the rails. And if they hadn't made Black Noir, he wouldn't have gotten anxious spending decades next to his sole lifelong target, since he didn't go off the rails until, being desperate, he did a bunch of horrible things on picture posing as Homelander and sent him to the boys, hoping he'd get the chance to finally fulfill his purpose. And if he hadn't made those pictures, Homelander wouldn't have seen them and had his identity crisis over not remembering them, leading to his attempted coup to prove he's a god that ends up killing most of the Soups when it fails. So from start to finish, the only thing that played a part in Vought's downfall was itself. And when you think about it, the only reason they ever fail or the boys ever win is for that exact same reason. Like, if Soups were made with quality in mind, they'd probably never lose to some beat-up assholes in trench coats like the boys, who realistically had nowhere near the same level of resources at their disposal. But since Vought are sloppy and didn't put in the effort just to save a few bucks, the boys have a leg up purely by virtue of actually being trained. And actually, on a broader scale than that, Vought wouldn't even have to deal with the boys if their product was good, since literally every member was only scouted to join after Soups recklessly fucked with their lives. So it's like I said, no one could ever be a bigger obstacle for Vought than the consequences of their own carelessness. So while the boys on their own were never going to topple the concepts Vought represents, they really didn't have to, since inevitably, as long as they make bad product and forget to learn from their mistakes, which to keep their profit margins big they obviously will, they're kinda doomed to topple themselves. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or well, unless they run the whole fucking country, of course, then it gets a bit harder for them to self-implode. What's that? Vought's supposed to show that any company, no matter how big, still has the capacity to fall if they found themselves on faulty principles? But how will people know Homelander's Trump if we don't have him ruling the country? Oh, I don't know, guys. Have you thought about not doing that, since Soups weren't designed with that allegory in mind? Like, they represented three goddamn things: celebrity culture, the comic industry, and the military-industrial complex. You know, on one count, they're icons with a clean image and dirty secrets. On another, their history has them starting out great with the help of a genius until, he leaves, and they can't innovate without him, so all they can do is look at the Seven and make endless cheap derivative knockoffs based on their DNA. Then for a third, they're the next in a line of faulty products from a company who spent its whole life trying to sell obviously faulty garbage to the military, since that's where the money is. Bing bang boom, that's superheroes and the boys. Clean, simple, easy to understand. And you know what else? It's so thoughtfully constructed, they don't just work as separate themes on their own, they're also tailor-made to support each other in the context of the story. Why do Soups have celebrity culture? Because they're barely functional nukes with low quality control who can get what they want as long as they're profitable. Why are they faulty products? Because they're derivative slop from a company that makes more just cleaning up mistakes than improving the formula. Why does Vought keep pumping them out? Because as military suppliers, they know they can keep chopping the quality within a limit and still be accepted. Every idea builds on the other to make a strong allegory, like a brick wall. Which means naturally, the show staff looked at that allegory and asked, hey, why don't we do it without any bricks? And this is one of those things where I can't even say season 1 did it better, since from day fucking 1, most of it's not even there. Like, minus a few exceptions, we only follow the Seven, so anything about Soups getting pumped out and copied doesn't exist anymore. Vought's history of products, not even mentioned. Connections to the military-industrial complex, totally gone. The only thing they keep is the celebrity culture, which granted is fine enough for what it is, but it's still way less nuanced than anything in the comic. And somehow it only gets worse from here once they start trying to do other stuff with them. Like season 2, we're introduced to Stormfront, a character whose whole thing is taking Soups from a spin on celebrities into a spin on far-right politicians, being that she's a Nazi who uses fascist rhetoric to get people angry. And already at the first sign of branching out, this doesn't work, since the load-bearing column for Soups being able to exist is keeping up appearances, which matters especially in the show's case, seeing as they go from a comic analog to a Disney one. Just imagine Imagine if at Disney World, Donald was reading quotes from Mein Kampf and inciting hate groups. That's the equivalent here, and it would never happen in the comics since soups, like celebrities, have to stay on a tight leash to get paid. They're supposed to keep a low profile since their image is so controlled, which makes it that much stupider that they also try to make soups an allegory for violent racist cops. And okay, I can get the connection here. Soups have a duty to save people, cops have a duty to save people, bad soups are sloppy and get people killed, bad cops are sloppy and get people killed. I see the idea, but it flops in execution since the show's allegories are just way too direct and obvious. So when they want to make a stand-in for crooked cops, they literally stand in the place of crooked cops and profile people, kill minorities at traffic stops, imply they're reckless or violent intentionally in black neighborhoods. But this is just dumb conceptually since soups are not police officers and they shouldn't be making arrests, let alone for carjacking. You ever notice one thing that's missing from almost any issue in the comic? Soups saving people. And that's by design, because soups aren't meant to do any real saving that isn't heavily planned beforehand. You know, for the sake of their image? I mean, where's the sense in letting their soups do ground level cop work? That's just asking to go wrong and damage the brand. Not to mention it's just a waste of the soups' time, which is why you never see them doing it. What you do see is soups at events, conventions, movie premieres, places celebrities go to promote something since in essence soups are mascots, so they're not gonna do anything actually heroic. That's what the comics are for, which Vought says are real to give off these heroic images without the risk of the real guys messing it up since they're total amateurs. It's just common sense, and like a lot of things in the show, season 1 seemed to get that. That's why they explain as much in episode 2 when Annie has to fake a save, and then when she actually saves someone, she's told off. Since there's so many complications in a real rescue that they have to be planned for insurance reasons. They literally explained how the idea worked, so them just undoing that for a ham-fisted metaphor they should know doesn't work, it's frustrating. Though, I guess it's kind of just par for the course with how the show handles satire. Like, out of everything people say it does better than the comics on basically any level, the one that pisses me off the most is the idea that its social commentary is smarter or bolder, since that couldn't be any further from the actual truth. The only thing the show's smart at is taking safe, predictable takes and dressing them up like they're controversial, even though they're obviously not. I mean, just look at the main villains of each season and what they represent. Homelander, Trump, Stormfront, alt-right politicians and Nazis, Soldier Boy, abusive chauvinists, Firecracker, Alex Jones. Like, can you really sit there and tell me the show was taking a big swing going after these guys? Were you watching in real time thinking, my god, finally, someone in mainstream entertainment had the balls to call out Alex Jones? Truly, we're on the precipice of major social change. And look, if they want to make fun of Alex Jones, more power to him, the guy's insane. But see, that's just it. Everyone already knows Alex Jones is crazy. You're not shocking most people when you say he's bad. It's like calling out Andrew Tate. It's basic. And it'd be one thing if they actually had something new to say or just restricted themselves to one-off gags of these characters, but they'll literally spend whole seasons on them just to say things anyone who's ever heard anything about these topics before already knows. Oh, the right uses memes to send you down a pipeline? No way. Conspiracy theorists prey on people who lack a purpose? Never heard that one before. Racist cops are bad? How insightful. And you might assume I'm simplifying what the show's intentions are with that, but no. They just state the message within the first couple minutes of meeting a character, and then they spend the rest of the season beating that message into the ground without ever expanding it. There's no nuance, no depth. It just feels like it since they're going one step beyond the average SNL skit by making them soups, so it's an allegory. Although honestly, it's kind of a stretch to even call it allegory, since allegories are like big abstract concepts shown symbolically through a narrative. The Long Walk is a story about poor kids forced to keep walking a certain pace or get shot until one of them technically wins, but leaves with a load of mental problems and all their friends dead. That's an allegory for the Vietnam War. So does The Boys really feel like an allegory next to that? No, it's more like write about a social issue, but then replace a word with super and call it a day. So Stormfront will talk about how soups, with compound V, are needed in every city to take down super terrorists. Then Blue Hawk will kill a black guy and say, soup lives matter. Then the embodiment of Reddit will go on about Homelander saving America for the alt-soup movement. Get it? Do you get it? Do you get what they're talking about? I hope you do, because there's no big idea being summarized here, there's no analysis, they're just taking a group of people they want to joke or talk about and putting a suit on them. And half the time they can't even do that much. You know what they do when they want to make fun of controversial events by parodying them? They don't. For the Kendall Jenner Pepsi ad, they don't make a parody out of it with jokes or something, they just recreate the ad and insert A-Train. When they parody the COVID Imagine sing-along, they don't try to comment on it, they just do the thing but insert the Deep, since the Deep is a funny superhero, so that's how you know it's funny. It's writing that relies on the fact you already know the commentary and jokes around the moment, so that when they do their version, you'll think, they're doing commentary and jokes about this. But they're not. This isn't commentary, it's reference humor. It's meme reference humor. You only think it's commentary because they reminded you of the jokes everyone else told about it, and through some weird sort of joke osmosis got you to associate them with the show, even though they didn't tell any jokes. The only difference between this and disaster movie recreating memes is the choice of memes. And that's the root of the show's commentary. It's not saying anything deep or thoughtful, it's just paying lip service to being deep while taking easy shots it knows its audience and most people in general already agree with. It's not here to have a discussion or change your view on something, it's here to feed you back your own beliefs while treating you like you're smart for thinking them. And the worst part is that it doesn't even come off genuine, since if it genuinely believed all the things it's saying it does, it wouldn't be so basic, recycled, or frankly, hypocritical. Prime example is the way they treat Maeve's bisexuality. You know, there's so many jokes about how Vought are willing to exploit that Maeve has a girlfriend to be inclusive while treating her like a prop, but let me ask you this, what's Maeve's girlfriend's name? They say it multiple times, so you should have a good idea. And for the few hands in the audience going, ooh, I know, that's Elena. Great. What's Elena's personality? What does she contribute to the show other than being Maeve's on-again, off-again girlfriend who doesn't take her shit? Don't you remember all the scenes she had that weren't about Maeve? I hope you do, because I've been searching for them for years. See what I mean? It's pandering. It's the same reason that after a certain point they just start randomly inserting quotes out of nowhere, like, hey Hughie, you shouldn't be afraid of a powerful woman, or why is it I always have to be calm? When white folks do it, you motherfuckers go crazy, but when I do it, suddenly I gotta pump the brakes. Or, I'm not gonna throw a fit, that's the white man's luxury. Like, trust me, none of these are relevant to the scenes they're in or have anything to do with what's going on. They're just thrown in to show that, see, we think like you think, but it comes off performative every time since they don't attempt to explore these ideas in any meaningful way. They just want to be like, hey, you know what we're talking about, without putting in the work to actually say something, which is part of why I appreciate the comics so much by comparison, since when they want to comment on something, they comment on it. They go into the minutia of whatever it is they're talking about and come out with answers based on the story. Like in the show, with Stormfront being a Nazi, there's nothing else to get from it, it's just, yeah, she's a Nazi, and far-right politicians are the same, so when people like their ideas, they like Nazi ideas. Whereas in the comic, when they find out a soup is homophobic and killed a gay teen by accident, they don't just end it with, yeah, homophobia is bad. They use the celebrity angle to talk about sensationalism, and how the fact a soup is gay can be seen as more scandalous than the fact they murdered someone, even though people who are gay or trans or whatever else are still human beings and shouldn't be fodder for tabloids or potential blackmail. Since the whole thing's a mystery around if he really killed the guy or not too, there's even comments about how they shouldn't wonder if the soup is gay, since making assumptions based on that keeps leading them off, an obvious nod to stereotypes and how sexuality doesn't define a person. You see? It's integrating its commentary so naturally that them getting the message helps move the story, almost like it was thought up with that in mind. Then, when they actually find the homophobe, they don't just tell you it's bad and leave it at that, they go into his psychology. We hear him talk about how he doesn't just hate gays, he's actively repulsed by the thought of them. So much so that even the idea of one thinking about him was enough to push him away right off a building. So it doesn't just have him kill the gay teen and leave it at that, it shows us what makes his thinking so horrible. That's how you do commentary. And also, notice how this story uses the allegory of soups and celebrity culture to its advantage instead of making them an allegory for something that doesn't work. You see the same thing in We Gotta Go Now. On the surface, it's a story about Hughie finding some nice soups in training who lack social and sexual boundaries from, as he comes to find out, being abused as kids by the one who took them in. While thematically, it's about how Hollywood can scoop up kids with promises and fame at a young age only to take advantage of and groom them until they either feed back into the system or just can't get out. I mean, imagine that. Imagine a story that works on one level as its own thing and on another allegorically without you even needing to connect them. It's crazy. And not just that, when they want to comment on shit like politicians or the CIA, stuff that obviously wasn't intended with superheroes, they just go in, what do you know, have characters who are in the CIA or politicians, since you can do that. No one's gonna stop you. You're an adult show, right? You don't need to act like your audience is a bunch of kindergartners who won't get it if you don't phrase a math problem using jelly beans. Although actually, you know what? With the way they treat everything else, that's probably who they assume's watching. Because I don't think they respect the audience, at least not like they used to. They sort of treat them like kids now, simplifying the message, making it more obvious, adding more melodrama, just constant jingling keys to keep your mind placated. Like, I remember when in season 1, they'd only have one big gore moment every episode to really keep it impactful and shocking. Now it just feels like every season they're trying to top themselves for how much gore they can shove in. It almost feels arbitrary. Same with the character arcs. There's not any meaningful growth anymore, but they've been doing arcs every season, so whether they've got a new story to tell or not, they're gonna get a subplot that takes away from the main story. A main story they've been stretching for years since they fucked up the original so bad they don't have a clue where to go anymore. And hey, the comic's not perfect, there's plenty you can criticize, but it never felt like it overstayed its welcome. Every part, every miniseries, every arc, they were necessary for the story. And with all the foreshadowing he did, you could tell Ennis planned it so every twist felt satisfying for the reader. Yes, that includes the Black Noir reveal. A lot of people like to clown on it for being silly and ridiculous, but that's just because they don't know the context, which is that from early on in the comic, Vought mentions having a countermeasure for Homelander if he went wild, and they never directly say what that thing is, but they know it's more efficient than just using a nuke to take him out. Meanwhile, in Homelander's story, he's constantly shown blackmail of the most horrible shit involving him, but he can't remember it. So he mistakes it for him being above humanity and stages a coup to prove as much, only to find out it wasn't him. It was Black Noir, a clone of Homelander specifically trained to kill him. He was the counterbalance Vought set up but didn't need, since Homelander was only ever just an asshole. And since he was only designed for one murderous purpose, not getting it for decades drove Noir mad. So to speed things along and get what he wanted, he staged those photos, sent them to the boys, and hoped shit would happen. And it wasn't immediate, but he got his way, proving in the end that Homelander wasn't special. In fact, he was so disposable they could make a clone just for taking him out. That's the type of build-up the comics were on. Now look at Black Noir in the show. For seasons on end, he's built up as mysterious. He bides his time, waiting for the spotlight. We finally get his backstory near the end of season 3, and right when it feels like he'll amount to something, Homelander shoves a fist through him. Then next season, he gets replaced and becomes a joke. And really, that's a perfect metaphor for the show. Whenever it looks like something's happening, it fists us and expects us to love it when they replace it with something worse. Ironic they got rid of Vought's history, because it looks like the show's doomed to repeat it. What else can I say? It's just bad product. I don't know if this will change any minds. I'm kinda used to getting called stupid for saying I like the comic at all, let alone compared to the show, but if this will get someone to pick up the comic and try to read it in earnest, I think I'll be satisfied. Thanks for watching, and here's hoping Season 5's at least entertaining. Peace